Pardon?
Yeah, that's working.
Good evening, councillors, officers and members of the public. Welcome to this evening's meeting of Children, Young People and Education Scrutiny Committee. Please be aware this meeting is being fully recorded and going out live on YouTube. I'm a YouTuber, according to my grandchildren. Can I please request that all mobile phones are switched to silent or off for the duration of the meeting? Please can I also take this time to remind members regarding the procedures of tonight's agenda. Should members of the Scrutiny Committee wish to amend, remove or add additional recommendations or request as part of the Scrutiny Committee remit, then please could I ask members to state the purpose of their recommendation and at the appropriate time during debate. And a seconder then to confirm the recommendation, members will then vote on the addition, amendment, recommendation as necessary. Members, I kindly ask all members to be mindful of this when preparing questions and comments to ensure that each item receives appropriate attention and scrutiny within the available time. Should this meeting run past the constituted meeting, thank you, members will be asked to extend the meeting in order to finish business on the agenda. We will now move on to apologies received.
Thank you, Chair. We've had apologies from Councillor Brackenbury and Councillor Wright as well as the executive member.
Yeah, thank you. Any declarations of interest?
I'm a member on the Board of Governors at Kettering General.
Thank you, Judy. Anyone else? I've got one or two, sorry. I am my wife is a foster carer, so therefore I'm also a foster carer. And I am now a member of the National Union of Professional Foster Carers as well. A week in. Happy to move on for minutes. Minutes of the meeting held on the 14th of July 2025. Can I ask members if they are happy for you to sign the minutes of the last meeting as a true and accurate record? And only obviously those present at this meeting can approve the minutes. Can I seek a proposer? Councillor Jessup, and a seconder, please. Councillor Egan. Thank you very much. And all those in favour, please. Unanimous. Unanimous. Thank you. Moving on then to item 4. Northamptonshire National Trust Multi-Agency Safeguarding Hub, MASH. Can I please invite Debbie Lloyd, the Director of Social Care, Northamptonshire Children's Trust, to introduce the report, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry. The report in particular was for information purposes only, really, and it was to give you, the committee members, an understanding of the structure and the purpose and the performance of our multi-agency safeguarding team. We have included all of the early developmental work that we've been involved in with our peer organisations, but obviously stipulated from the onset where we were historically within our first inspection. So I think we've travelled a long way since then, unfortunately. And I think it's fair to say that we still have increased numbers of contacts at our safeguarding hub that don't necessarily need to be there. And I hope that the presentation has highlighted that to you. And one of the key features that we need to consider is how we strengthen our early help offer that enables the reduction of work that would normally be presented to the MASH. There is clearly a reduction has happened over the years, over the last 2 years. However, we still do see spikes. One of our biggest contact agencies is the police, which don't necessarily lead on to any kind of intervention from social care. There are a number of agencies that contact the MASH that obviously we are just providing them with advice and guidance and to seek early help support and early help support from other partner agencies. You can see by the percentage that actually lead on to the single assessments or strategy discussions or actual interventions from social care are considerably low when you look at the number and overall figures that are presented at the MASH. 41,000 contacts at the MASH, leading to a very small number of actual assessments that gets done. This overwhelms the partnership MASH, because of the information sharing that happens, the police, the health, the social workers, the decision makers, when they're looking at making those threshold decisions. So that level and volume, is impossible for this area to continue to work with. On the other side of that is our early help assessments and team around the family, which is meant to be the process by which families are helped at the earliest opportunity. And that should be the strength of any organisation. You don't and shouldn't require a multi-agency MASH to be looking and investigating families unnecessarily, sharing information unnecessarily, sharing information without consent. People ring the MASH and they haven't even spoken to the family to determine whether they need any help and support in the first place, but yet they're content to ring the MASH and present them as a concern. So we really do need to think about, what this means for our children and families first and foremost, and how we can move the position of not using our MASH as the go-to place for anything and everything, but that it's a place of safety for our children and families where we need to assess the safety of children. They are the right children that need to be there. And then the early help offer and, looking at how our partnership agencies are utilising the early help assessment and the team around the family better and in a more supportive way. Families can access support at the right time when they need it. And I think that's the critical point, really, of this presentation, is really just alerting you to the fact that we need earlier help. We need that all of those services to be looking at what they can do differently before and ringing the multi-agency safeguarding hub. And I think for me as well, because obviously in my service area, my targeted Tier 3 support service has tried to facilitate the support in this area. We have seen a decline in the use of that early help assessment process, which for any organisation going forward is a worry. That should not be declining, and our contacts at the MASH escalating. It should be the opposite way around. And I just think it's absolutely critical for us to appreciate that the investment and the messages and the things that we need to focus on are within that early help space. And, you know, we are making some headway now in relation to that, with obviously the family hubs coming on board. Well, they're here, but then they're doing a lot of work in that early help space. But we are still not seeing any movement in the space of the early help assessments and schools and health and people that should be doing them, using them. Yeah.
Thank you, Debbie. And we're taking the presentation as read, so happy to take any questions. And honestly, there's no such thing as a daft question. So if anyone's going, actually, what's the point of the MASH, then please do ask. What I would say is we have a really strong relationship with our partners. There's some wonderful schools in North Northants and West Northants. The police are at the end of the phone. We can have the conversations we need to have as our health. What this is about is us working together to fix a system that has come a long way and it's being fixed. This really is the next stage. How can we do that? How can community help and support families to stay together? If you think about social care intervention is the blue light service. It's the threshold under the Children's Act 2004 is the child at risk of significant harm or likely to suffer significant harm. That is the threshold for children's social care intervention. In Northamptonshire County Council, they took out all the early help and support services, and therefore there are a number of children that are in the care system now who had first referral, second referral, third referral, did not meet that threshold. But by the 8th referral, with no support, they did. And how do we, at that first point of contact with a child, as Debbie said, some of our amazing schools, our fabulous health visitors, our police officers who are out there on the streets all day, every day, identify this and go, actually, how can we get some support in before we get to the statutory social care threshold? And that's the system that needs to be built that colleagues presenting this evening, I know we'll be talking about too. When members came to the first induction session, I did the presentation about the forecasted numbers of children in care and where we actually were. That's a positive because practice has improved. That number can be less if we get the early help and support right. And that's got to be the goal for everybody involved, because it would be just amazing if we can support even more families to stay together where it's safe to do so. And finally, Chair, the aspiration is, if you compare, I'm going to say Northamptonshire as a whole in population, because that's the MASH deals with the whole of Northamptonshire. If you take Essex has got twice the number of children as there are in Northamptonshire, and they have the same number of children in care that we do. So if you do the maths, therefore, ideally, we would have, I'd like less children in the care system than there are now, if you base it on that. In the 2000s, Essex would be if Essex colleagues were here, they'd be the first to say that was a highly broken system and no one wanted to work there. Remind you of anywhere? Because that's what Northamptonshire was like. So this is doable and it's achievable if we all work together across the partnership. So thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Debbie and Colin, for that. Members, does anyone have any questions that they would like to put, any queries, concerns, obviously, over the relation of the report? Councillor Jessup.
Thank you, Chairman. Off police, etc. But I did wonder whether there is another partner that could potentially be quite vital, and that's housing as a statutory agency. Because I'm just thinking 5,000 plus approaches into homelessness provision over the last 12 months, I'm sure those 5,000 or potentially quite a number of those are possibly the same going into those 41,000 contacts. And I'm wondering whether there's an opportunity here to have housing as part of MASH, as part of that system that you've got with MASH, so that that could be a sort of shared resource and potentially, you know, reduce duplication. So it's more of a suggestion, because I'm sure the families, and I suppose the other part of that is around, can housing and as a partner agency take on that role for early help? Like you say, in education and schools doing early help, why can't statutory partners like housing do the same? So, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Jessup. And Debbie may wish to add in a moment, but just to say initially that you're absolutely right. The whole system is about a partnership. When we talk about MASH, we talk about the statutory social care threshold. That's what should come in. And housing would be a referrer in. The housing support that you describe is what should exist in that the lower down space, like tier 1, 2, 3. Debbie said, you know, certainly, you know, in the early help space. And so a really good example is in some places, you know, there's the housing officers attend sort of a monthly panel about, you know, families and where things are at with the families they work with and so on. But so what, to reassure you, if housing had a safeguarding concern, they would report it to MASH, and they are around the table as a partner now. I have to say, one of the challenges pre-NNC was there was an absolute disconnect. And so I think it's a really good suggestion. The more we can do that, and with housing colleagues being able to support families, because, you know, if you the main people that are going to be working with families, you know, housing is certainly one. Health visiting is definitely another. Every child that's born has a health visitor. You know, so there's some wonderful health visitors here. It's how we support them to, you know, be able to flag those types of things early. But it's a really good point. Deputy.
Yeah, if you don't mind. For me as well, in terms of the housing and the early help part of housing, my CFSS service are directly linked to all families that are being evicted, and they have a direct referral route into CFSS, you know, where they need help and support to remain in without that eviction. But so they are interlinked in many ways, I would say, actually. Thank you, Chair.
Any other councillors?
Thank you.
Councillor Gary.
So you have multiple agencies, often with different priorities. Ultimately, they're looking to do the same thing, but it's the brass tacks of how you do that. One is whether people get along, and number two, it's the measures that you need to get people to work together. Sometimes the measures can conflict. And one of the thoughts I have about all these separate organisations looking to solve a challenge of a child, because ultimately that's what it's all about, and if we can do it earlier, that's ideal, is getting measures that each organisation buys into, understands it's worthwhile, so that if I'm the police, I understand that if I get hold of young Steve Geary when he's 5 years old and he's got problems, I understand the implications of that in 20 years' time. And to be able to measure that and target that in a way so that Bobby on the street recognises that if he's dealing with a child that needs an extra couple of hours because they're doing their job properly, it doesn't go against them. And from a career point of view, often the work that people are doing in these organisations isn't necessarily a career-winning move. So my sort of thoughts are, how do we find those kinds of measures which value that? Because if you don't measure it and it's not valued, if it doesn't come up in your annual assessment, guess what happens in a lot of cases? So you talk about Essex, and I'm assuming there the conditions in Essex are similar to ourselves in terms of how the kinds of children they have, the environment. So then the obvious point, I dare say, is doing a bit of mirroring to see what they're doing and seeing what we can take on board as an example.
Thank you, Councillor Geary. Really good points, I think, and you're right. It's how do you measure and how do you hold it? How do we all hold each other to account in the partnership? So definitely, we've done work with Essex in terms of rurality, urban need, etc. There's a lot of similarities. Obviously different scale. So yeah, it's a really good point. And the kind of metrics that we use, that Debbie shared earlier, the conversion of contacts to so a contact is someone getting in touch. A referral is if there is. That's referred for an assessment, and the disparity between contacts and referrals is the measure by which we challenge that with each other, and that's okay. We're having better conversations now than used to happen, but there's still more to do. But it's in a trusted space. I know now that, for example, the police, this example you give, I've no problem to have a conversation with senior officer of the police around how do we look at this, whereas perhaps 5-6 years ago that wasn't a feasible conversation. So that happens, and the two other things just to mention is worth, and it might be an idea at a future scrutiny, for example, to come with partners as well and talk about how everyone operates together. I've seen that done before. That works well to build on this. But there's two key things I'd mention that give us hope and confidence. One is the working together guidance, which is the police, health, local authority and education are all statutory partners in the working together guidance that's been issued by the Department for Education. So now there is a meeting with the senior people from each of those organisations on a quarterly basis to address any issues that can happen on the ground. And interestingly, if you look at the recently published police inspection report, they cite that as a good area of practice. So the fact that that's happened, that was not the case a few years ago. So that's a real positive. And the other thing I'd say is that a multi-agency initiative led by the police, actually, to give credit where it's due, is the observatory. And what the observatory does is capture all the data of all the activity that happens. And it's not inappropriate data sharing, as Debbie referred to earlier. This is, what have you done? What's the numbers? What's the metrics? And therefore, that can help identify where perhaps there's been more activity relative to other areas, and therefore there can be more presence in that area, more support put into that area. And I think as the observatory evolves and the work through the family hubs, etc., is that there can be a lot more targeted early help and support activity in the areas of greater need. There's a lot of data already that the guys have on that, but I think, the observatory set up a live data set where we can, be really flexible in approaching the challenges that some communities and some families face. So I think your point you make are absolutely right, and it's how we hold each other to account under the working together guidance. It's a fair challenge.
Thank you all. Any other councillors? Or
could I just add to it, just to what Colin has said? So absolutely there is that strategic commitment from all partners. There is also learning and development for people on the ground, because it's all nice and good, people at the highest level being aligned and wanting to achieve something, but it's important how people who see children, go into homes, pick up need, and then have the right approach in relation to meeting that need. So there is and Debbie has briefly captured in her presentation, training and development that is actually happening across the partnership to make sure that we are all aligned and we all understand the needs in the same way, rather than just going for the highest possible level when you spot need. So that work is also happening. I am confident, as Colin has said, that this work will progress, and we will have a stronger system and better support for our children and families. There is very clear commitment, and we also see impact. If we look into data that is available, we see that we are making progress. It's just that it takes time, and we cannot achieve that as quickly maybe as we would like.
Thank you very much. Any other councillors at all? Oh, sorry, Councillor Jessup.
Can I just ask another question, please? Can I ask a question about the liquid logic system? What's your timeline, and what's the expected impact you think from actually the system, and will it help?
It will certainly help, yeah. We are going live on the 15th of September. We're very excited about it, I've got to say, because I think our the processes in relation to early help have been a challenge when we've been using our capita system. So now having both early help and social care on the same system, we'll be able to see a better and bigger picture. But also what will happen is that we'll have much more improved data as well. So, you know, we'll be able to see families that are being supported much earlier, and also our external partners, once we get the second layer of the system C coming on board, the external partners will be able to also input their early help assessments and team around the family plans onto that system. So we'll be able to see that as well. So it is going to make a big difference for us, most certainly, and from a partnership perspective. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor.
No, it's this year. We just need to go live first with the obviously the main system, and then System C is coming on board shortly after, because the System C is what is the electronic part of how you make contact with the MASH, and also how you would maybe do your own early help assessment and things like that. So that's kind of coming in next. So yeah, I would see it starting to form at the beginning, well, more towards the end of this year, but most certainly this year, because it's already there.
Yeah, Colin.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Debbie. I wanted to just provide a bit of context, because that's a great answer to the question. In my previous role, I rolled out, Liquid Logic is a system, there are other systems on the market available, just need to make that clear. This just happens to be the one we've gone through. Appropriate procurement, etc. Just in a public meeting, need to be clear on that. But I rolled out a very similar system in my previous role as a Director of Children's Services in 2017. The majority of places rolled out a similar system in the 2010s. Northamptonshire did not. We're now in 2025, and when and again, none of that is a criticism of anybody in this room. It's quite simply saying that's how broken the system was here, because there was no understanding of what was needed. And that's we're still dealing with those challenges. I'm not going to listen. We've come a long way, and I have to say the relations with Northamptonshire, West Northamptonshire Children's Trust are better than they've ever been, and we've got real hope for the future for the children here if we just keep going and keep pushing and keep improving things. That's the challenge we face. And to be sat here, I'll actually have been in the job 5 years in November, and to be sat here to be able to say that is really, really encouraging, because I have to say there've been times over the last 5 years where I never thought I could make that statement. But to be sat here with people I know, trust and work with, in front of members who care and are asking the right questions in scrutiny is a real evidence of the improvements that have been made. So sorry if that went a bit far, but it's just really refreshing to have this conversation, because it's the right conversation to be having. It's the right scrutiny, and it's really good.
Thank you. Any other councillors? Okay. And obviously, as a scrutiny committee, do we feel we have any amendments or alterations or added recommendations on behalf of the scrutiny panel at all? So it's recommended then that the Children and Young People and Education Scrutiny Committee members note that the positive developments in MASH, the continued focus and on development of early intervention and supporting families. And thank you, members and officers, for your contributions during the debate. And can I confirm that members of the Children, Young Persons and Education Scrutiny Committee have noted the considered and contents of the report and related appendixes and have raised comments or feedback as well as any concern to officers as part of the scrutiny procedure. We shall now move forward with the agenda. He looks after me. Moving on to number 5, which is the family hubs in Northamptonshire, please. And can I please ask Judy to start first as a strategic lead for the Families Hub and Early Learning, and also Helen as well, a Deputy Director of Public Health, to introduce the items, please. Thank you very much.
So clearly it's a night for microphones, or at least for my ineptitude. So thank you, Chair. So we're going to give you an overview of family hubs, think about the road that we've travelled so far, think of some of the key achievements and outcomes and what the next steps are for us. So Family Hubs is co-sponsored nationally by the Department for Education and the Department for Health and Social Care, and that's in recognition of the key importance of the very early years in setting the trajectory for health and well-being throughout life. So we have an integrated model of family hubs. Judy's going to move and talk you through some of those details. We are one of 75. We're gaining momentum, having there been some pause for local election and some other changes. And we're really going to pick up on some of what Debbie and Colin have told you, and thinking about how we're morphing into away from just having a family hubs board to thinking about family help, and really spacing us into that early intervention and support space where we've talked about the need in Northamptonshire and ensuring we have the need not just early in life but early at the point when families need it. I'm going to pass to Judy.
Thank you. So we were fortunate enough to be one of the 75 authorities that receive funding to develop and implement systems to prepare us for having a robust family hub model in Northamptonshire. During the first 3 years, we managed to launch 3 family hub networks, and a further one to be launched this year. But it's fair to say that the funding was all geared at the first 1,001 days of life. So all of the funding that came into the authority, 80% of it was geared at the first 1,001 days of life to implement pilots, etc. So that's from conception through to a child's second birthday. So although family hubs are 0 to 19 and 25%, all of that funding was geared at supporting those very early years. So what we have done is, like I said, we've opened 3 family hubs, and we've adopted the locality model of delivery here. So we deliver in 4 localities, and we've put into 2 clusters. The programme is part of the government's broader ambition to ensure that by 2028, 75% of all children are meeting their learning development levels in school. So we have a huge focus on school readiness. We have been very clear in Northamptonshire that family hubs are not just about one building. They're about a network of buildings, and they're about the partnership of all the professionals and all of the agencies that come into contact with children and families during their lifespan. So, as Colin said, it's really important that we build upon the strength of the partnerships. So we work with education, health, housing, the police, the whole raft of different agencies. And we have particularly engaged and collaborate very well with the voluntary sector partners, without whom we wouldn't have a robust offer. We've also been very clear that our family hubs will be the vehicle for delivering that a new early help and early intervention model. And it's really critical that we give families access to universal services where they can come in, they can meet a variety of different professionals under one roof in a safe environment where we can have professionals that are skilled to identify needs at the earliest opportunities, and they know how to ensure that those families get that help when they need it by the right person. We've also taken the opportunity to utilise all of the resources that we have within the partnership to look at commissioning in a very different way and utilising those resources to the best of our ability. So this year we worked very closely with Public Health and we recommissioned our 0 to 19 service. We split it into 2 different lots to work with 2 different age ranges, and it was a very innovative approach. But what it's enabled us to do is give a wider response of professionals that can be available to support those families. But it gives us the opportunity to share training opportunities, upskill the wider workforce, and work together more collaboratively to meet the needs of those families. We've also, as part of the model, developed a really robust digital front door, because we all know that during COVID, when families needed the help most, there was very little help around for them. So we have embedded our 3 information and guidance statutory duties within one digital front door. We've invested in digital apps to support families, and those apps are already providing us with evidence of impact. So one of the apps that we've procured is the infant feeding app, and it will come as no surprise to you that the most prominent time for that app to be used is in the middle of the night when babies are screaming and crying and parents just don't know what to do. But what it's also shown us is that a high percentage of those families using that infant feeding app are young mums. So young mums and the younger generation are very techie savvy, and so they tend to veer more towards technology to get their information and support rather than actually physically come in. So what we're doing is creating choice but giving support to families 24/7 every day of the year. So how are what are we doing moving forward? We've got lots of test and learn pilots that are underway, and that's helping us look at new and innovative ways of delivering interventions with our partners. We've invested heavily in training the voluntary sector. We've got lots of peer support models going on, because actually, peer support is a fantastic way to for everybody to support each other. And we've got a volunteer academy that we're about to pilot. We've been fortunate enough to be given some money to develop a core team, and at the moment we're recruiting to that team. So there will be teams within the hubs. They're very welcoming environments. Families will come in and they are beginning to know the staff. We've got outreach going on. We've got connectors. Their role is to connect families to services, but also to connect services to each other, which is really important, and Colin kind of alluded to that a little bit earlier on. So the next thing that we have to do this year is open our final network in Corby, and so that's the next thing, and we hope to have that open, launched and running by April next year.
So to build on what Judy was telling you about recruiting to the team, so one of the key strengths is the multi-agency nature of that. Some of the public health funding has gone into the team. So again, thinking about that early start, but also expanding into thinking about what's the offer sort of beyond preschool, what's the offer of school age, and then up to 25%, and what's the difference in that, how that offer needs to sit. So thinking about some of our youth work, youth coordinator roles, for example, and strengthening always that connection between family and services. And the sweep from that universal, so what everybody might require or might choose to accept, alongside that sort of escalation of need. And the key part of this is pulling that earlier, making sure we do have that robust early help, family help offer, that early help and support, so needs don't escalate and don't end up with the marsh when families could be supported in a different way. And we might be thinking about needs that are emerging that might relate to an early identification of a SEND need. It might be where, perhaps there is, mental health issues in the family and family needs more support. There could be a whole range of things where the right support is crucial. Over time, that will release resources. We know that early intervention is cost effective, and what's more, it'll mean that the outcome for children, people and families improve. next steps are around recruiting to that core team. Judy's fast recruiting as the system will allow to get the right people into place. We've talked about opening the final network and ensuring that we've got robust governance that supports the change in moving from family hubs to thinking about family hubs and family help. And I'm going to close our summary there and open to questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, both of you. Members, any questions at all for Councillor Monday?
Thank you, Chair. So section 7.2 of the report mentions about funding gaps, risks of funding gaps. So I'm just wondering what sort of contingencies are in place if that does indeed arise.
Do you want to answer that? Do you want me to take that, Judy? Because we're thinking about the understanding national... So there's a couple of things here. One is that Family Hubs funding was for 3 years. Then we were told there'd be a 4th year of funding. We've been told by national government that funding will continue, but we haven't... The value at which that will continue hasn't been confirmed. So that will enable us to think about how we continue to use funding. But because we thought funding was coming to an end, there are exit measures. You know, this was always around transforming the system rather than relying on the funding. And then in terms of funding within the council, it's ensuring that the model we have is right for where we are now. Did you want to add anything, Judy? So, Connie, is that okay?
Okay, and post-2026, is the funding going to continue? Have you got any sort of... are you aware that the funding is going to continue post-2026? Because it seems, again, to be a bit of a risk that you're sort of doing all this wonderful work, and it is wonderful, and then funding's cut off. And
I think there is funding coming down in various different guises. There's a Families First funding that's coming in, which Cornelia can allude to.
We do need to look at sustainability, so absolutely that's something that is being considered, and there is bigger reform, you know, there is social work reform in wider sense, looking at family help and how we deliver family help, and it's thinking about the bigger picture and how we utilize family hubs, part of that bigger transformation, you know, that's coming. So it's all thinking and planning, you know, to ensure that the best help is provided to families.
I think the other thing that we've done is, because we've started to think about how we commission services in a different way, it's utilising what we've got within our financial envelopes, what we've got within our commissioning activity that helps it be sustainable moving forward. So the fact that we've aligned the 0 to 19 contract with it, it gives it, you know, a robust mechanism to move forward. And then we will have that core team there. But, you know, I can't underemphasise the strength of the partnership and what the partners and the voluntary sector people agencies bring to the table as well. And that's why we've been very clear from the beginning, because we didn't have a children's centre model here when we built this, and most authorities would have built on a core children's centre team and developed their transformation project through that route. Well, we didn't have that, so we built the partnership, and it is exceptionally strong, and it's a very good partnership here. And so because we've invested right across the sector, we have actually started to make it be sustainable by just, you know, multi-skilling. You know, we've done some workforce development. Everything we've done has been co-produced as well. So they're coming on that journey with us, and everybody sees the value that they bring, but they also see the impact of the differences that we make together.
Thank you very much. Councillor Egan.
To me now. Thank you very much for your report. It was really good. I've just got two quick questions. And how are family hubs ensuring equal access to all locations, particularly in vulnerable and hard to reach groups? And the other one was, what specific work is being done to engage families in Corby ahead of the network launch?
So the first question about an equitable offer, we know if you look at Wellingborough, it's very different to East Northants. East Northants is very rural. So in East Northants, we've got the main hub, which is at Oundle, but then we've also got a satellite, if you like, at Newton Road. But when we talk about the network, we talk about community centres, we talk about leisure centres, schools, any community groups. So we could take services out into the community as well. And when we consulted with families in East Northants about where they wanted to receive the services, Newton Road was their second choice to have a satellite. So the schools, we're identifying space for us to go in and do drop-ins, and we do quite a lot of outreach. Over the summer, we did some delivery with partners in the parks. So, wherever possible, we're as visible as we can be. And in each locality, there is an operational group that's being set up. So all of the partners that deliver from 0 to 19 in the area come together, and we look at who can offer what. So some people might be able to offer staffing, but don't have anywhere to deliver it, and other people might have a space for delivery, but they don't have the services. So we're looking at those kind of things moving forward. So that's how we're ensuring that, we do get out as far as possible to reach everybody. And then your next question was about Corby.
Corby, how are you getting on with networking ahead of the launch?
So there is already an under 5 offer at the moment being delivered in Corby, but we need to expand it across the whole of Corby. So we will have to undertake a public consultation because, like we consulted in East Northants about where people wanted it to be, what we've done here is what many authorities have done is we've repurposed our children's centres and we've turned them from a children's centre status into a family hub status. So we've already got the network and we've got the stakeholders identified. The next step will be identifying what the footprint looks like and what that actual delivery will look like, and then we will consult on it.
Awesome, thank you very much.
Can I just add in terms of some of that equity? The other thing, and again thinking about some of what Colin and Debbie have said, is about understanding our population. So what do we understand about our population in each of those areas? And based on that, who are we seeing and who aren't we seeing? Accessing services provided by family hubs and partners. And that enables us then to target those groups, whose voices are less often heard. The other part of it is just to build again on that digital front door, and I don't know how many councillors have had an opportunity to look at it. Well, I'd really recommend it. Yes, I'm biased. But what it has on your onboarding is something that really tailors it to you. It might think about the language you speak. It might think about, those of us who benefit from a different colour of paper. All of those things mean that people can access information. And when you tell the front door a little bit about yourself, perhaps where you live or the age of your children, that means that offer comes to you. And for somebody like me who's, very interested in evidence-based information, the way it works is it's its own. The words that's coming into my head is special universe. I know there's a technical term. So it draws on evidence-based information within it and therefore doesn't have some of those risks that it might have if you're just, you're a family and you're looking for information on the internet and you won't necessarily know which, is strong evidence-based solutions.
Yeah, thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Any other councillors?
Chairman.
Councillor Chester.
Thank you. Can I go to the work stream of delivery section in the report? I'm just going to ask, do you have, or are you going to perhaps come back again and tell us how you are achieving the outcomes in your work streams and what difference you're making and how the programme's going? Because it'd be really helpful to see how, for example, the infant feeding support that you've just said with the app, exactly what that looks like for us, so we can see that going forward, if that's okay, Chairman.
We can certainly do that if you'd like us to. The work streams are predefined by the DFE. They were broken into 4 work streams, and a lot of our pilots are geared up around this, so we can come back and we can tell you exactly what we've been doing and the impact that it's had.
Chairman.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Councillor Brooks.
Thank you. Yeah, I just have a few little questions, but I've kind of scribbled bits down, and you've answered some of the bits, and I just want to link it all together. So you were talking about tier 3, which is early intervention. You're talking about 0 to 11, sorry. And so what I'm assuming is that the hubs are an early way to pick up, to try to steer stuff maybe into your earlier intervention rather than into the MASH system, to get this before it all becomes, you've got this label, you've got that label. Does that make sense?
Yes, so the purpose of the hubs is to provide universal access to families. So we know after COVID, a lot of services didn't remobilise and a lot of families and children were hidden. And we're reaping the benefits of that now, aren't we? We're seeing that children are presenting with significant speech and language delay, unidentified needs. So the opportunity for families to come in and we can see them universally, they will trust us. They will tell us where their issues are, but we will also have a skilled workforce and all of the partners in there to pick up the needs early on. Now, it may be that we can work with those families with really brief, swift interventions and we can sort the issue out straight away. It might mean that we have to maybe be the facilitators of an early help assessment, or if it needs to be escalated to MASH, we do that. But I think that the family hubs are that opportunity for families to be seen, to come along to activities that haven't been there for the last few years. But I think, the skilled workforce and the early identification is critical, and some of those things can be dealt with in-house without the need for them to go to the MASH.
Okay, fantastic. So I take it you're gearing this at mothers in maternity hospitals and whatever, so that when they come out, they've got that straight away.
Yeah, so the minute that a mother is pregnant, she gets information about the family hubs and our Start for Life offer. And then that's reinforced again when they go to register the baby with the registrars, because you have to do that. So, their leaflets are given out then. We advertise, very, very widely. But we're not just, although the funding was geared at those first 1,001 days of life, we will be, and we have expanded working with young people and the whole family as well. So, while predominantly it started focused around that, we are starting to think about the whole family. And as the staff come on board and they get trained, obviously the expertise will widen too.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, just to make it clear around the Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, obviously Tier 1, Tier 2 is very much in that earliest help stage. It's universal service, so everybody can access that. Where it's beginning to emerge, I would say, into families needing a little bit extra support, you've got your Tier 2, and Judy alludes to that quite well when she's talking about, those early help practitioners that they will have. But Tier 3 is very much about supporting complex families. Very often these are families stepping out of social care or preventing them escalating into social care. So that team there at Tier 3 is very targeted, I would say.
Thank you. It's a very good report, and I think you really kind of cleared those few little bits up that I was just wanting to link together to make sure I understood that what I thought was what you were thinking. Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Councillor Eake.
Am I okay to get another one in, if that's okay?
So what we did learn from, we've done quite a lot of insight and everything has been co-produced. What we did learn was the value of digital resources, and so that's why we've heavily invested in it. One of the top 3 ways that families wanted to receive information was videos. And so you will see, if you go on the front door, we've invested in a suite of 11 videos on the different services. And we're really proud of those.
Yeah, it's
because
a YouTube generation now, isn't it? That's
it
pretty much what it is.
It is. But those videos are real people and real professionals. You know, we haven't had actors do them. So, you know, and I think that's important so that people can see themselves, but they can, you know, if they go into the antenatal unit, they may well see the midwife that was in that video, so it makes it real. So the digital journey, I think, was really critical, and we began to understand that. The way that we use language needed to be simple. The way that people could find out where services were was very critical. And just the variety of services that we can offer, but from various places, not just necessarily in the one place. So, you know, as we expand the networks and we start to get out into the heart of the community, I think, you know, we really will meet the needs of those families.
Yeah, so basically you're having to start everything from scratch again, aren't you? And then you're trying to remember what everyone's done in the past, but trying to make it new and up to date to 2025 going into 26.
Yeah.
Because everything's got to be bite-sized, how BBC used to do it with the kids, didn't they? Bite-sized education. So it shows my age a bit now.
Certainly younger than some of us. So the point, I think what you made is a really key point around engagement, is that it's a continuous process. And when we engage, we need to make sure we hear as many voices as we can. And there are some people in some communities whose voices are less often heard, so we need to communicate in a different way to learn. And sometimes that's from, you know, voluntary sector community partners who already trust. So every bit of it is, when we talked about the infant feeding and the Anya app, that was co-produced. When we think about some of that home learning environment, what does that need to look like? And then we take that into what we're doing next. So we talk quite a lot about the role of health visitors, and we've been doing some work about the 2.5-year review, which is part of the Healthy Child programme, and how do we ensure that parents see the value of that. And one of those things might be, let's do a film that tells you a bit more about it. Let's do, you know, an infographic picture that tells you what's going to happen during the review. So that engagement and learning won't stop.
So I'm presuming you're using social media to try and help more as well, to get your name out there. From my point of view, I want to say thank you to all of you for tonight, because, you know, I have been quite naive because I ain't got kids myself. So I'm not really that way at the moment, but I'm having to learn a lot, and it's been an eye-opener. Thank you.
I'll press my button then, Vince. Thanks for letting me know. So I was just conferring, because I was just checking what I was thinking. You were saying about the baby feeding app, and it's always used at night. Can you just kind of tell me a little about that? What are they doing? Are they texting, or are they talking on a video chat or web?
So it's an AI app. And it's got lots of information and resources on it, but they can actually have a conversation in real time with somebody on the other end of the phone via the app. It is available, like I said, 24/7. I think the interesting thing for me is, I wasn't surprised that the highest volume of usage is in the night, but what I was surprised with was the age of the mums using it. You know, because young parents are notoriously hard to engage with, aren't they? They feel intimidated. They don't necessarily come into the wider network of groups that you run. So to see, I think it's about a quarter of them are young mums, and they are receiving that support, I think, is given us a new route in to engage with those families. The other app that we've got is called Easy Peasy app, and that's more about a parenting support app. So they all work in the same way, but that's got a real focus on speech and language and communication. So whilst we can work with a child and the parents in the nursery with the practitioners, the parents can do activities at home as well. So you are rounding the support, because if you work with a child in a setting but you don't do anything at home, it's not going to change. So we're trying to wrap a whole suite of resources around a family so that we can make as, you know, the bigger impact as possible.
Okay, thank you. So just to confirm, that's by text and it's AI, and there are other people on it as well?
Yeah, they can have live chat. So they can have live chat with a infant feeding support practitioner. But yeah.
So they're not talking to other mums that are all sat up at 2 o'clock in the morning?
No.
Going,
no.
If my husband snores one more time.
No. But, you know, the infant feeding groups that we have in the settings, the mums are starting to come together and get little WhatsApp groups going. So they are actually supporting each other as well. Technology, technology and social media is the future, isn't it, for them?
Yeah. I just, what I was kind of alluding to as I saw something on a little news snippet where they were all mothers and they got on a web chat in the middle of the night when they're on there, and they're all obviously very happy about the fact that they're up at 2-3 in the morning, etc. So but it was a live chat that we're just chatting to each other as we are here in the room, etc., which I thought was very good.
That's where the peer support models come in.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Colin?
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to pause.
Julia?
Just following on from that about the app for the feeding, I know young mums can get quite anxious about feeding times, especially at night. Baby won't sleep, mum gets very tired. Is there any app or extra help for young mums that are maybe isolated, they've no family, postnatal depression, things like that? Are you doing anything extra in that area?
So when we talked about the 0 to 11, so the Best Start in Life service being integrated with family hubs, one of the elements in that is support for families that need that additional support. So our model historically had just focused on young mums. You might have heard of Family Nurse Partnership, but through the recommission we've expanded that to think about the different sorts of people who might need support. So if a mum or even a dad were experiencing some issues with their mental health, then because that's part of the health visiting team, then somebody can have a health visitor but also get additional support. And one of the other themes, and I'm going to pass to Judy in a minute, was around that, what's often called perinatal mental health and infant mental health. That's been another strong theme through family hubs. But what I thought you were going to say when you talked about a mum being dad at night is thinking about safe sleeping. So some of our much broader work is thinking about, how do we avoid deaths that sadly relate to unsafe sleeping. And we know there are increased risks, for people who, smoke, perhaps have drunk alcohol or use drugs, but also very tired parents. It isn't safe for the baby to be in the bed. So the work with Family Hubs joins together all of those messages to make sure parents are receiving support, because particularly with younger parents, our role as professionals and listening to professional voices may or may not have the same power as something you found, on the internet, something that's AI generated, or a social media influencer. So we need to change the way we communicate to keep up. Shall I pass to you around perinatal mental health?
Well, it's just to say that within our digital front door, we've got something called automated care pathways. There's about 40 of them on there at the minute, but they're all national pathways, and over the next 12 months we'll be taking them one by one and then embedding some of our local resources within them. So when Helen said that it's quite intuitive, when a family onboards to our digital front door and they put in the areas that they want to be notified about interest, if you like, if they say put in infant feeding, it would send them out messages at appropriate times on different things that would be of interest to them. So the digital front door is quite new. We spent 2 years, working with our partner to get it right and build the content on it. But over the next 12 months, we want to build and develop the AI further, so that families can self-help. I think that's kind of what you're gearing at. But also, we're not the only ones that are developing these front doors and these AI and these pathways. NHFT are looking at their own models. But what I can say is that all of our partners, anything that they're developing, it can be accessed through our front door. So we link to each other and vice versa. So we link to them, they link to us. But, what Helen said at the beginning was really important, because everything that's in our front door is safe. So the way that we describe it is as a box, but it's a safe box, so that we know that the information that they're getting within it is the right information. Whereas if they were Googling, you can get information from anywhere and everywhere, can't you? And it's not necessarily the right. So our front door is a safe box, and it's evolving all the time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Colin, thank you for your patience.
Sorry, thank you, Chair, and thank you to everyone for the really helpful comments and really good presentation. I thought it might be helpful, just in the spirit of what was said a moment ago, just if you look at this from the perspective of a family or a child, because after this evening there'll be lots of thoughts and thinking, what else could we look at? What can we look at Scrutiny Committee for next year's kind of round and plan? So have a think about elements of this you might want to look at more deeply. But if you think about it from the journey, you've got sort of, a child's born in the hospital. Generally speaking, hospital arrangements, there's certainly NHS involvement there. There's health visiting, which is supported by public health in each of the councils. But throughout all of that, there's kind of a support to ensure the children are safe. And if you look at that across the tier 1, 2, 3 and 4 that we talked about, tier 4 is social care intervention. That's the top end of where there needs to be statutory support to step in and support family, because and the aim of that is still to keep families together. Just to be clear, that is the aim of any social care system: keep families together where it is safe to do so. If it's not safe to do so, then you need to take action. But through that whole with all the stuff that's been talked about, you move from safe certainty to safe uncertainty, and it's like that's the tier 2, tier 3 stuff, and that's where if the system's working effectively, you can kind of help families where they need to. When it talks about referral 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that's referral 1. So there's the universal settings in tier 1, and then any kind of help and support that's needed can be provided at tier 2 and tier 3 with an aim, if that's the spectrum of tier 1 to 4, with an aim of moving backwards. So even when children are open in tier 4, so they're open to statutory social care services, the aim is, how do we support, put the conditions in place for the family to get back together. So a good example of that is we've worked with the family court to create a family drugs and alcohol court. It's because drugs and alcohol was seen as one of the two of the key factors that led to breakdown of families. Because as Helen just said, oversleeping is it's an awful example actually of something that is a real challenge in child deaths. So and what they do is they work with the family. So rather than having a predisposition to take that child into care because of drugs and alcohol concerns, they work over a fixed period with the family and they do regular testing, counselling, support to see if they can help the parents or parent come off the drugs or the alcohol that's really challenging their parents in their lives and their behaviours. And then at the end of that, if that can happen and the court are happy and there's been therapeutic support and the family dynamics better, then that family stay together. That's how it should be. But the more that's kind of picked up earlier, the easier professionally it is to do that work, and that's what's been described, I think. So I thought that might help as a bit of context. So.
Thank you very much, and I'd like to thank everyone for their participation in the debate that we've just had. We've had a proposal. Oh, sorry, was there any other? No. We had a proposal, obviously, from Councillor Jessup and seconded by Councillor Egan, that the Children and Young Persons Education Scrutiny Committee recommend that officers provide a regular monitoring update in relation to family hubs to assess the effectiveness and impact of the support systems. Can I ask all those in favour for the recommendation?
Unanimous, Chair.
Unanimous. Thank you very much. Moving on to item 6, attendance, elective home education and alternative provisions, please. And can I please invite Annette Peerington to take the floor?
Thank you, Chair. Evening all. So tonight I'm going to present to you sort of the third report, really, which is this one working? It is, which is looking at the benefits of supporting families and children early. So attendance, elective home education, exclusions, suspensions are all something that's really come to the forefront following COVID, and really where we see high levels of those, whether that's high suspensions, exclusions and high levels of absence from school, low attendance, it's a symptom of something else which is often related to families. So it's not frequently what we may all have thought of as related to attendance issues previously. So it's really relevant today because we know nationally that there's a big focus on how do we improve this, how do we return children to school. Since COVID, it's been a real issue. National attendance hasn't improved, and it's the same for us locally. We do have some exacerbating features, and we've heard some of those today from the base that we've needed to come from in terms of the journey that we're going on. But this month was the first month nationally and also in an NC where actually there has been a slight improvement. When it comes to attendance, you've also got that challenge where you have parents being responsible to send their children to school. You also have term time holidays, and you have a lot in the news around penalty notices. And the local authority's responsibility is to support schools in their attendance. So we have a challenge sometimes. We move from the support to the families, but then we have to move into enforcement, and that can be a real challenge. And part of our role really is to try and myth bust, I think, some of the challenges and the situations which occur. One of the things that the government have done is they have, in the same way as with safeguarding, they have issued new statutory guidance called Working Together to Improve School Attendance. That became statutory in August 2024. And that looks at attendance very much from a safeguarding lens. If we know our children are in school, we know that they are safe. If they're not in school, we don't necessarily know what they're doing. And it also raises that question around attendance. Are there other things happening in that child's life which may be impacting on their attendance? Do they have some unmet mental health needs? Possibly, do they have some, are they caring for somebody within their family? Are they maybe being exploited? So it really begins to question maybe some of the reasons why we might think that children are not attending school, and it seeks to engage professionals working in collaboration across all of our services across the trust and with schools, with family hubs, to say we need to know where our children are. We need to know they're safe, because when we see them, we know where we can offer support early. So attendance is really important, and I'm sort of coming really today to sort of try and raise the profile of the link between children going to school and feeling comfortable in school, the challenges that some children may find in attending school, but also the other reason for absence, which is related to suspensions, exclusions, and parents choosing now more than ever to electively home educate. So you have the report there. I'm not going to say anything more than that. It's the third report. You've heard a lot of information tonight, but I'm really happy to answer any specific questions that you may have, and to hear if you think there's anything else that we might be able to do.
Any members at all? Yeah, Councillor Mundy.
So I might be a little bit out of date here, but I think parents now get fined, don't they, for their children missing school. So I'm not sure when that came in, but what has the impact been since that new bit of legislation came in on children's attendance?
Penalty notices for quite some time. It's the same process as a fixed penalty notice for a speeding fine. It's there as a deterrent, and it's there to discourage parents from taking their children on holiday. And it is a cause of a lot of national debate as to whether that is correct or not, for multiple reasons. One is obviously cost. The second is that some families can only have family time at certain times, and there is an allowance that the ultimate decision is down to head teachers. So actually there's quite a lot of pressure on head teachers because they then get judged by Ofsted around the level of attendance, but each case has to be looked at individually. The local authority's role is because we have to issue the penalty notices on behalf of the school in the same way that we have to issue penalty notices for parking. There are only certain organisations that can, if you like, be the responsible body for collecting a payment and then potentially having to go on into a non-payment situation. So that's the local authority's role. We also act as a check and balance. One of our roles is always supporting and advocating for parents. So we look at each of the requests that come from schools. We look at the checks and balances. Is this right? Does it feel comfortable? Is it going to be? Is it going to benefit, if you like? Is it going to change anything? Because we have to think about the impact of potentially placing a fine on a family if actually the reality is they may not be able to afford it and take them into a different route and further enforcement. So we act as checks and balances. I know it's being looked at the moment. It's quite a controversial aspect, and it does reflect that challenge that we have as a local authority in that our role under the Children's Act is to promote the welfare of children and attendance at school. So we support as much as we can. We look at those other reasons, but we do at some points have to move into that enforcement role. And that's quite difficult, I think, for families to see us both in that support and enforcement role. And it's certainly very difficult at times for officers because we do have to undertake enforcement.
Thank you very much. And the second question is, what are the sort of main reasons for, I guess, temporary and permanent exclusions in schools? Do you sort of have that data, or sort of?
We do. We collect data on all sorts of things. The most common reason still, and it's in line with national, is what's called persistent disruptive behaviour. There are a number of categories, and they can include, as you might, expect, maybe around substance misuse, maybe around assault, whether that be to a pupil or a peer, verbal or physical. But the most common reason is persistent disruptive behaviour, which means that this is behaviour that a school is deeming to be unacceptable in line with their behaviour policy, because a head teacher does need to maintain, if you like, order and good behaviour within their school to support learning. So again, it's individual decisions which are made by head teachers, and the local authority has a role within that in ensuring that the governors are considering every head teacher's decision. But persistent disruptive behaviour is the most common, and that's where it links very much with what we've talked about today in terms of early help. Some persistent disruptive behaviour may be because of a special educational need, in which case you have to look at whether that behaviour is something the young person has a choice over. It could be that there are some mental health, anxiety issues. So we have to look, and schools have to look and consider,
is there any support to the child or to the family that may change the situation before the very big decision to permanently exclude a child is taken place? We do have higher levels here. If we look at the reasons, they're very similar that Colin has already explained. We are coming from a bit of a slow start. The early help, or the family support as it's now going to be called, is in its infancy. And so we do need to expand that early help. And I think that would be one of the things that I've taken away, actually, because it's been 3 really excellent reports tonight that are linked together. How do we support children feel able to come into school? How do we support that learning environment? How do we support them want to be there? Like any situation, they will want to feel safe, they will want to feel heard, and they will want to feel included. Where head teachers make those difficult decisions, and sometimes they feel they have to, we have then to do some of those checks and balances, but ultimately it's a head teacher's decision. We know from talking to our schools, they want more access to speech language therapy, occupational therapy, mental health services, youth support, alternative provision, all the things that can engage young people in some of the challenges that they are facing in today's society. So what we've heard today is really, really helpful, and essentially we need more of that to impact and reduce suspensions and exclusions and support head teachers in their day-to-day roles of helping to support children to learn.
Thank you very much. I'm glad you mentioned early help, because that was going to be my next question, so it's covered now. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Eglin, sorry.
I'm telling myself often. Going on with what Councillor Mundane was saying about your department being like the stopgap between schools being too much on the fining and stuff like that. Where do we draw the line and say, no, you're wrong here, and what happens then? Because I'd be intrigued to see what the schools do if we don't agree with them, and do they push back or what? Is there, you know what I mean? Do I make sense?
Can't decide if it's on or off, sorry. We have quite strong relationships with schools, and we're working on how we are improving those relationships by very similar types of approaches. You know, we need to work in collaboration. It's usually around being clear about whether a criteria has been met and whether it's beneficial to issue, if you like, a penalty notice. Ultimately, though, if a school really wants us to issue a penalty notice, unless there's a very strong reason that we think we should not, we will. So we have lots of individual debates where that may happen. Our head teachers are actually really clear on the criteria as to when they can authorise and when they cannot authorise an absence. So in terms of issuing those penalty notices, there isn't as much debate as you might think in terms of us needing to apply our checks and balances. It's been in for a long time. Head teachers are quite used to having to take some difficult decisions, and parents are actually frequently very aware that if they are going to book a holiday, that might happen. I think where you have more ingrained issues of non-attendance, so where you might have a child that is severely absent, so they are missing up to 50% or more of being in school, that's where the local authority can take quite a lead role in looking at issuing a school attendance order and working with the school to support the school get that child in. It's rarely about, we rarely have the debates about issuing the penalty notices, because they're, if you like, reasonably straightforward. It's the more complex situations where we have to support schools where we're just not seeing the children, and the schools can't shift or make that shift on their own.
Where do we draw the line on how many times a parent can be fined if their kid's not coming in? Because you can get 10 times down and 10 fines and they're still not coming in. and then that family's going to have that huge fine they've got to pay. What if they're on benefits? How are they going to afford that? And,
so there are limits. There are, under working together to improve school attendance, there are now limits about how many times you can essentially fine a parent, especially if it's not going to achieve any change, in which case then you would change some of the enforcement approach. So it may be that you would have to look at a different approach, and one of the approaches we will always use is trying to understand what are the issues for that family, what are the reasons for that non-attendance. It's rarely, I should just say, at that level about going on holiday. I've got to make that distinction between a parent making a choice to go on holiday and accepting a penalty notice because they, you know, that's the choice that they're making, versus a child that is routinely absent from school beyond just going on a holiday. That's a different situation, and in those situations you have to look at what are the underlying causes, because the non-attendance, if you like, is just the demonstrable symptom of that.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Jessup.
Thank you, Chairman. Just going back a step, thinking about the exclusion and the fact that we know, don't we, that SEND and the health assessments, we've got obviously backlogs, we've got quite a demand for those assessments, the CAMS, referrals, etc. So are you seeing that that is an issue with exclusions because they haven't got those assessments, so they've not got a diagnosis, then therefore not being able to study, potentially disruptive? You know, are we seeing this pattern, and is there a way out of this going forward?
So yes, we are seeing a pattern. It's reflecting national. Without a doubt, the time taken for timely assessments does have an impact. Again, it's all linked up with what's available university, what's available in terms of additional help, and then what's available in terms of targeted support that you may have when you refer to something like CAMS, because that's a Tier 3 service. How do we support the most children? You are always going to have some children who are very complex and who need to have additional and very targeted support. We do see that in the figures that we have, and we do see that that's also the case not only in suspensions and exclusions. We see it with parents' choices around elective home education, where they feel that schools are just not able to meet their children's special educational needs, and actually they make the choice to electively home educate. What I would say, though, as well, is that we have some really good SENCOs. Every school has a SENCO. The SENCOs are working incredibly hard with families, with all of the providers and the partners available to meet the needs of children. We do, however, though, have a challenge with the number of specialist places we have available, which is causing a challenge for some of our mainstream schools. So we do have higher numbers within our mainstream schools. It's the same with alternative provision, which links with the suspensions and exclusions. Place planning takes a long time. Building a school takes a long time, and I know that the council have supported some capital funding to support this. Where you have what's called a sufficiency of places, so enough places in the right locations and choice, then you can see some of the positive impact that actually it doesn't then come through in terms of suspensions, exclusions, but also in terms of attendance and also in terms of parental choices around elective home education.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Councillor Munday.
Thank you, Chair. Is it on? And we've spoken a lot about early intervention, and I think it's really, really important. And I think obviously any small intervention as early on as possible is a help rather than none at all. And I speak from obviously my own experience here of being a little bit of tearaway when I was younger, and I was raised in a single parent household myself, and I just think, what are we doing for the parents when we recognise this persistently bad behaviour? What sort of early interventions are we offering parents? Do we consider this as well? Yeah, that's my question.
Here we go, getting there. Yes, we do, and that's exactly where family hubs come in. Frequently, we might offer something like what's called a parenting course, and not all parents like that term. And so the use of the social media, the apps and things that you've heard of today, sometimes can be less challenging. When we're offering parents support and help, it's not because we think they need to take a course, like a speed course. It's there actually because the peer groups can really help and support parents. Understand that actually they're not the only parent who's going through this. So we use a variety of methods, opportunities to engage with parents, and so do schools. I know, for example, the Family Hub, only recently, one of our teams, the specialist support team, went in and did a parents' coffee morning with parents of young people who may have children who have on the autistic spectrum condition, and really support them and understand some very simple strategies and interventions that actually may seem, if you like, obvious to some, but are not obvious to some, because every parent is in a unique situation. So we do a lot of support. Could we do more? Absolutely. Would we like to do more? Yes, please. Early intervention, unfortunately, is one of those aspects that is not a statutory function, and then often, and I might be talking out of turn here, but I'm going to do a plug anyway, is often the bit that goes first, and actually it's the bit that we need to be investing in, because it's the most proactive, cost-efficient, and best use of our resources. Parents want it, schools want it, partners want it, police want it. It makes perfect sense, as you said. It's a bit of a challenge sometimes for us to do that. But yes, we do support parents.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, come on in.
Thank you. And I was just thinking about, as you were talking there, about the presentation we were doing earlier, and we, highlighting the need for our partners to do that early help assessment and convene that team around the family, and how significantly important that is, because it's at that earliest opportunity. If you're going to make a change, the change that you make, the earliest point, is easier to do, and the engagement is better than when it starts to move into an escalation stage where it becomes more entrenched and difficult. So for me, that early help assessment, talking to families, getting them on board, looking at the external factors that are driving the non-attendance at school, because it's very often not just about going to school. There's an external factor that's driving it as well. So, we have the team, of our, what we call our Strength and Families assistants to work with schools, who can go into the family home and support the children to go back into school. And the schools do a lot of unique and creative things, obviously, to encourage children to go back into school. I think for me, where I would, kind of make a plea in terms of the use of that early help assessment is fixed term exclusions. I very often feel that fixed term exclusions that lead on to permanent exclusions. I don't believe a child should be excluded from school without having had an early help assessment and a team around the family put in place, because that whole support mechanism needs to be provided for that child to remain in education and not be excluded at all. because it's a process that we have, it's a process that can support, and it's multi-agency as well. So I just kind of highlight that as it's really important, but it's really positive as well.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gearing.
Thank you. A question on exclusions. Some schools I would challenge maybe where the management isn't particularly efficient, may be tempted to go down either the exclusion route or encourage parents to home educate. Is there any truth in that observation?
It's a really good question. I'm going to take both separately, if I may. So in terms of encouraging parents to electively home educate, it's something that Ofsted have been very keen on for a while, and it's commonly known as off-rolling. As a local authority, we collect all of the information from parents who have chosen to take their children off-roll. And if we have any indication that that may have been the case, we will follow that up. You'll be pleased to know that that is not something that we often see in Northants, and I think that's really positive. In terms of, do all schools encourage parents to think about where their child may be best placed, and where some schools, like any organisation, may have some challenges around leadership, history, culture? We work very hard with those. We have a school effectiveness team. We monitor all of the maintained schools, and we also monitor our academies. We have a range of what we would call inclusion indices, which include attendance, suspensions, exclusions, elective home education. We cross-reference those, and we work very hard with their schools. Do some of our schools have maybe a different level of tolerance than others? In an authority the size of Northants, yes. What we try to achieve is consistency of practice, so that it's not a postcode lottery for parents, because that's what we want: consistent practice, consistent early help and intervention, consistent responses to thresholds, consistent levels of inclusion, consistent levels by having family hubs in all of the localities. So we are actually rolling out some very good inclusive training to schools for free, called the RAISE programme, on the benefits of relational practices. So that's about encouraging schools to think about how they are working with families and children. And it's a challenge for schools as well. They have big organisations, they have lots of young people who are all coming with different levels of needs, some of whom who do not want to be there, some of whom who have some additional challenges. So we have to support our schools as well to understand the best evidence-based practice, and that's what we're doing as well. So again, you've heard it today, coordinating, collaborating with their partners, taking that support approach, coordinating networks, making sure we're getting the right information out as we can, doing some myth busting, focusing on that early intervention, does begin to shift some of the practice, if you like, I think that you're referring to, of some of those schools that may, in the past, have needed or have taken some decisions that we may not, if you like, have felt comfortable with.
And one other question is, should the performance of the school start to change negatively, a lot of these indicators inevitably take time to be recognised. So as a very, very rough guesstimate, if a school starts to turn for whatever reason, how long would it be before those signs start to come through?
It's a really good question. It depends where it is, to be honest, within the system. I mean, you'll understand and you'll know from, I'm sure, all the information around education that local authorities have left less levers, if you like, than we did previously to intervene in schools where they are deemed to be failing. So we have to work incredibly hard. That's why the relationships are so important.
both with individual schools and also with multi-academy trusts and also with the Regional Directors Division, the RDDs, as they're called, used to be Regional Schools Commissioners. We have to get in there early. We have to identify. We have a lot of teams in schools all the time. So we have our NCT colleagues, we have our own teams in there, we might have specialist support teachers, we've got our attendance officers, we've got our inclusion officers, we've got our family hubs. We recognise and can pick up anecdotal information quite quickly, which may give us some early indications that actually we need to monitor a school quite closely. And where we're able to, we will go in and intervene. But it's not, I can't give you a timescale.
Thank you very much. Colin?
Yeah, I thought it might be helpful just to give the National Association of Directors of Children's Services view on this, because it's a really valid question, and there are different views and you know, questions about how this operates nationally in the way you've just said, and what a proposal that's been suggested in Ofsted inspections of schools. The key sort of tactical challenge nationally is how can you have good and outstanding schools in a particular area when a SEND inspection doesn't go particularly well, and often that's because children are out of school, and the inclusion point that you make doesn't necessarily stack between the two, and that's just with SEND, and then there's other factors as well which may lead to parents being encouraged to remove their children. You know, you don't want your son/daughter to be suspended, do you, or permanently excluded? You know, you wouldn't want that on their record. You might want to think about educating at home. I'm not suggesting that happens in Northamptonshire, but there is definitely a narrative along the lines that you've suggested. And so there is a question around when there's an Ofsted inspection of schools, perhaps that shouldn't just look at children that have been excluded. Perhaps it should look at people who've actually left the school, because legally, as a parent, if I write to school and say I'm taking my child off roll, I have the legal right to do that. There's no recourse, so therefore that's not part, understandably, initially that's not part of the inspection framework, and there is a suggestion that perhaps that should be. So when you look at a SEND inspection across the whole area, perhaps look at the inclusion levels of the school by saying, okay, how many children are on roll, how many are on now, you know, what have the changes been perhaps, or, you know, at a child level preferably, and then when individual school Ofsted inspections happen, looking at that level of inclusion in the round. So how many parents have decided to remove their children from the school, for example, and I think that data would be really interesting to see, and particularly as part of an Ofsted inspection. So I hope that helps. I'm happy to take questions on that, but that's kind of a national sort of question that's happening at the moment, because as it stands, that, as you write, that isn't captured, is it, anywhere formally, other than, of course, by school admissions, but it's not recorded in any inspection framework.
No. May I come back on that one? We do actually know some of that data, which I think is really good, and that's some of the indices that we've been thinking about. And we know for our electively home educated cohort, for example, about a third of parents are choosing to educate their children because of philosophical or religious reasons. About a third are choosing to educate their children because they are not as satisfied with the schools as maybe they would be. So we would need to look at the reasons for that. And the growing ones, which I think are a concern, and go back again to your question around the health assessments and the amount of support available, are just under a third. It's where parents are saying that they are concerned that their child has some mental health or some well-being issues which are giving them concerns about attending school, and so they choose to electively home educate them rather than go through that challenge every day. Those are the young people that we can absolutely support, and that's what we need to be looking at. That's not a school necessarily based reason. It's about how can we support. So attendance and absence and exclusions and suspensions in elective home education, they're really complex reasons. There's no one thing that you can do. Yes, we need our schools to be inclusive. Yes, our schools need support to do that, and they need to have as many options available to them to be able to do that. We also need our services and our children identified early and supported. And so we are working with our health colleagues around some of the lengths of times around the assessments. It is a long wait here, and we do need to look at how we can improve that waiting well. That would make a big difference to our families and our children.
Thank you very much. Julie?
Just a quick one about children that are educated at home. What is in place to make sure that the children are getting as good an education as they would at school? Are there any statistics available to show how well they do compared to children that attend school?
Simple answer is no. There are no statistics available to say how children do academically or from well-being perspectives, because when a parent decides to electively home educate, they take on all of the responsibilities that would normally be provided from a school, including any financial and or exam arrangements. So the reason that we get the information on how schools, if you like, how children are doing with their examinations at schools is because the schools give us the information and they give the government the information. Parents do not need, parents who have chosen to electively home educate their child will, in many cases, still be arranging exams through different examination centres, but they don't have to report that. So we have no direct comparisons in terms of how well children achieve from an electively home education position. It follows, therefore, that it causes us anxiety at times that we don't know because we are used to knowing. It doesn't necessarily follow that some children aren't achieving well. Again, you have to look at the individual circumstances. For some children, it is sometimes the best option, and parents are making the right decisions. For others, where the reasons are maybe not quite so clear, or where there are some challenges in whether that child's actually receiving an appropriate education, that's difficult. I think that was your first part of your question. So how do we know? When a parent decides to electively home educate, we ask them to give us an indication of how they are planning to provide an education for their young person. It's a really grey area in terms of legislation. We cannot demand that they provide us with a home education plan, but we take it as a very strong indication if they don't, that actually we therefore can determine that their child's not receiving a suitable education. And so we will then take, again, a supportive approach. Have you signposted, these are some resources you might want to use, this is age appropriate, here are some groups. Where we still don't feel that we are getting and are confident that a child is receiving a suitable education, then we can move down again an enforcement. So we go from support to enforcement again through a school attendance order, which we would apply for from the courts. So we do monitor all of our 1,070 and we do children, and we do that annually. It's a challenge, especially with the numbers that we've got, but actually I am very assured in NNC that the teams are really working hard and focusing on children, whether they have, their parents have made that choice, whether they have some unmet SEND needs or whether they have an education, health and care plan. So we know all of our children, we're tracking them as much as we can do, and we track those children who are potentially coming off school roll and moving abroad as well. We have agreements in place with Border Force. So we do a lot of individual tracking of children. That's part of the working together. And I would just bring your attention to that new guidance, because that is something that we are working towards in terms of our compliance. And it is a growing piece of guidance that was actually not funded by the DFE. And yet you'll see in the report there's been some very significant additional costs for local authorities in being able to undertake those new statutory duties.
Thank you. Councillor Brooke.
Yeah, sorry. I should just quickly. There are a lot of families out there that cannot afford in the holiday period a holiday, and those children can benefit hugely from a week's holiday with their parents, etc., to somewhere really nice that they're never going to get to go to in the holiday period. And I realised that it's a fairly it's a fairly rigid thing, I suppose, but it's quite a consideration that it's poor families that suffer the most from this. Rich families don't care. You earn massive money, you can just go whenever you like. But but poor families really struggle when they're struggling hand to mouth, and those children are massively missing out on a very vital part of family life if they don't get that holiday. Just an observation. That was that one.
I was going to say, you're not asking me to comment on that, are you?
No. I just wanted to make it clear that, you know, it's a very important part of a child's life. You know, they could have that memory forever.
Yeah.
You know, I remember my childhood holidays, you know, even now, as old as I am. Very worrying. But, you know, they're vital. All I'm saying is they're vital points in a child's life. And due to commercial pressures, holiday period is a very expensive time to go away on holiday.
It is. It's a very expensive time, and it's a great challenge for everybody that's involved in the system for the reasons that you say, and it's one of the reasons why it's politically a cause for great debate currently, and what can be done commercially and otherwise. And I think it's probably also fair to say that as a local authority we're required to be compliant with legislation, and that's what we have to do. But I also I think there's some myths around what the local authority does. We don't receive any funding, so the fines go back to central government, the penalty notices. We take a small amount of funding for the administration of that process. It doesn't come to NNC at all. So I just wanted to make that clear.
Yeah, no, it wasn't the money side of it. I was thinking it was just the you
Agreed.
know. And the second thing I wanted to say was, with some of these younger kids, not everyone learns in an academic way. I think me and you Colin have had a conversation about this. I'm a very practical learner. And let me tell you, like Chris, if we'd have had a bingo cards of tags that you could have been, I would have had a full house in no problems, because I was a very unruly child. And it was only when I got into practical learning that it changed my life, absolutely. And it is fairly obvious, even for young kids, to see how they learn practically. And I think it's a really important thing the absence from school, unruliness at school, can just be the fact that someone says, you know, I don't want to read that, can't be bothered, why don't I just play up, because I'll be sent out, and then I don't have to do it. But if you gave them a practical task to do, straight on it. It's very important that we look at the way children learn, and whether this is causing some of your issues. I'm not saying it's all, I'm just saying some of your issues. Is that something you...
Absolutely. I mean, people learn in different ways. It's been known and recognised for a very long time. And I think, again, there are some concerns in some aspects around the narrowness, maybe, that the curriculum for some people is showing. Others will say, actually, there's more flexibility than there's ever been. Schools are required to deliver a broad and balanced curriculum. They don't have to deliver the national curriculum. It's not always academically focused. You have more choice now in qualifications than you do vocational, T-levels, all of those. But it's about the emphasis, maybe, and the way that those qualifications are sometimes considered as important, and the equivalency of those qualifications. There is still that academic expectation around, GCSEs, A-levels. But actually, yes, for a significant number of children and adults, actually the best way that we learn is practically. I'm a visual learner, it's not necessarily the way that people learn. Is one of the reasons why actually having a choice of alternative providers is really important. Alternative provision started, if you like, some time ago as the alternative when you couldn't do mainstream school, if you like. It was the pupil referral units. You weren't able to manage, behave, whatever in school, and you went to a pupil referral unit. That's not the case these days. Our alternative providers provide a very, very important opportunity for children to engage with something that they wouldn't necessarily have the opportunity of engaging with, especially sometimes within the school. But the schools can provide that by accessing and making partnerships with alternative provision. Forest schools, so you were talking earlier about the children who don't have the same opportunities. Schools are able to provide things that maybe they cannot. They're not the best, They can't all afford a forest school teacher, for example, but they might be able to purchase some time. It's really important that we have that choice in the localities, and that can be half a day a week. It can be up to full time, if that's what's necessary. That's one of the ways in which children can be supported to learn. But are some children still finding it a challenge to be within a very structured environment? Yes, they are. And you can see that in the numbers. That's why they're not attending. That's why they're being suspended. That's why sometimes they are moving towards exclusions, and that's why parents are choosing. So how do we create a system that's more equitable and inclusive for all? It's a challenge for every local authority, and it's a challenge for government currently in terms of their policy, specifically for children with special educational needs.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Forest schools, I just heard about them at the weekend. Someone mentioned them to me. I haven't had a proper chance to sit and read about them yet, but it's something I'm going to look at.
They're well worth a visit. There are a number of forest schools around here. We take the children into an outdoor environment, and they do what you would do in a forest that maybe you would have done with your family or with your friends, that is not available for some children to be able to do now, but in a safe environment, I should say.
Yeah. No, that's fine. I'm going to research that anyway for a school, so because I'm interested in it. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'd like to thank all members and officers for your contributions on this evening's debate. And I can confirm that members of the Children, Young Person Education Scrutiny Committee have noted and considered the contents of reports, relevant appendixes, and have raised comments and feedback, for feedback, as well as concerns to officers part of the scrutiny procedure. We shall now move forward with the agenda. Moving on then to number 6, Scrutiny Forward Work Programme. Can I ask members to note the content of the Scrutiny Works programme for the forthcoming meetings of Children Young Person Scrutiny Committee, please? Just before I close, can I just mention to those new dads out there, the hub is also open up to you and not just new mums. It's also for new dads. If you have problems trying to get any information around help for your child, please feel free to contact your own NNC counsellor or one of us direct.
Sorry, Chairman. Are we still on the forward plan? Chairman? Yeah.
Yes.
I was just going to ask, Chairman,
Go on,
with your approval, given the excellent presentation we have just had from Annette, is it possible that she comes a regular sort of biannual update to Scrutiny Committee so we can see how things are progressing? Sorry, Chairman, to interrupt.
Can I second? Yep. All those in favour?
So it may be helpful to say that Annette is unfortunately leaving us, so it will be somebody with responsibility for that area.
No worries, but thank you very much. And I'm on a deadline from Callum. And if I can also say to you out there, if you can give a young person or a young child a safe environment, please look at adoption or fostering. We do need your support in helping any young child in NNC. So please think about it. And I'd like to close the meeting now.